2 or 3 times a year, as a young boy in the 1960s, early 1960s, my parents would take me up to London to one of the major cinemas, Leicester Square. Huge screens, the kind of size that the only comparable things these days is an IMAX or something, but just an enormous conventional cinema screen. And one of these was to see Lawrence of Arabia. Monumental performance from Peter O'Toole, directed by David Lean, set in the deserts of Arabia. So you can imagine what was cinemascope, widescreen, these visions of shimmering sands, mirages, flickering, apparent oceans, just all dry sand. But along with those breathtaking images, what stuck with me, stayed with me, was just a line. One of the minor characters spoke, "It is written." And the action centres around its true-ish story. T. Lawrence, young British Army officer in the First World War, sent to the desert and ends up leading various groups of the Arab clans there against the failing Ottoman Empire, the Turks. And in one of his most daring exploits, he leads them across the desert. They ride, making an impossible journey, too far without water. They ride their camels both day and by night. And at the end of this, they reach the oasis. But one of his Arab companions has just gone to sleep on his camel during the night and fallen, missing. His Arab companions tell him, "It is written. That was his destiny. There is nothing that can be done about it." Lawrence, being white, being Western, being the Englishman, decides, no way, he's going back. And of course he rides back along their route and many hours later returns with the missing tribesmen. Much jubilation. It is written, except for one who writes his own fate, his own destiny. Fantastic. Except, of course, the sting in the tail of this is that later on in the story, after Lawrence and the guy that he saved have become firm friends, there is a dispute between two of the Arab clans involved, and a mysterious murder happens, and it's revealed that in actual fact it's his friend who's committed the murder. The only way to avoid the alliance breaking apart, defeat at the hand of the Turks, is for Lawrence to execute his friend himself, which he duly does, shoots him. It was his destiny after all. You cannot fight destiny. So within this story, and it's interesting that it's a story of colonialism, of the West's beginning to dig into the Middle East, particularly in the light of what's happening in Israel-Palestine at the moment. The white man who's attempting to exercise control, and the fatalistic, superstitious Orientals who can do no more than say, "It is written, there is nothing we can do." And I suppose that was a practical introduction to a couple of the ways that we can take the idea of karma. we have to understand that to the best of our understanding, and the fact is we can be certain about virtually nothing about Shakyamuni, the Buddha, about early Buddhism, but we have probabilities, the best stories we have, the best accounts we have. And so, according to our best understanding, we have to understand that the Buddha's use of the idea of karma was astonishingly radical. We don't know whether he was the first to make such a proposal, but it was a very radical proposal. And if we think of karma, it's a traditional Indian concept, and we can think about the way it applies to caste in traditional Indian society at that time. And again, we're not quite sure whether this was a system becoming established then, or whether by then, and we're talking several hundred years before the Common Era, it was already a long established practice. But that you have this system whereby you have caste. So, distinct groups within society have distinct functions, and there is zero interaction or intermarriage or possibility of shifting between one group and another. This is what one is. This is one's destiny. One is a Brahmin, so one is part of the priestly caste, or one is part of the warrior caste, or one is part of the merchant caste, or what we'll call the peasant caste, or way below that, an outcast, or what we would today call Dalit, what we have thought of in the recent past as untouchables. Those people who have no social standing, who perform the most menial possible tasks within society and receive zero thanks for it. But that one's karma was simply to live out one's destiny appropriately. If one was a warrior, one might strive to be a great king. If one was a Brahmin, one should cultivate the spiritual life. It's laid out for you. In that sense, it's written. There is no ambiguity, no possibility of change outside this. And this is the law of heaven. This is the law of heaven and the law of earth, the law of creation. Karma itself simply means action. It's really at the most basic level, talking about cause and effect, and it's a very widespread and kind of, because it has such a general meaning, it can be used in many different ways within Indian philosophy and even within Buddhist culture. So what's so different about Shakyamuni's use of this word? Well, if karma is destiny, is fate, effectively this is nothing to do with you as an individual. It's nothing to do with the quality of your person, your moral character, your thoughts. In fact, the most basic duty of you towards karma, towards society, is to carry out the correct rituals at the correct time. And that will obviously depend upon your station in life. And basically, the whole point of the priestly caste, the Brahmins, is to carry out the majority of ritual on behalf of the whole population. That's how you keep heaven and earth in their appropriate relationship. That's how you guarantee the best functioning of society, through the performance of ritual. So the Buddha's huge innovation is to say that's not the most important aspect of karma by any means. In actual fact, it's entirely about the quality of your actions, of your thoughts, and ultimately of your intentions. and the framing of those intentions, we can call your will. And so in terms contrast to this idea of you are placed and you stay in place, know your place, that's what we say, and that is the foundation of a well-formed society. No, you as an individual shape your destiny, your future. It's through the quality of your actions and the quality of your intention. What goes wrong? Broadly, you're ignorant and you crave things. We all are. Consequences follow. Bad karma. There is a sting in the tail, though. What determines the quality of your character? What determines the station that you find yourself in life, if it's not some immemorial, pre-laid down, pre-existing plan? This is the quality of your past karma. Obviously, it's the sum of all your actions which have brought you to this point. And so we have, again, this kind of ambiguity between what you bring and where we go from here. That's a fundamental question. And we can finesse. And different schools of Buddhism obviously do finesse in different ways, this connection between past and future. What they all agree on is that, we bring the inheritance of the past, but in this moment we have, to a greater or lesser degree, freedom, choice. Again, we can ask about what determines the range of that freedom, the range of that choices. We can get quite technical. If we want to talk about the quality of our intention, the quality of our will, we might, of course, point out that since well before Freud, we've been aware of unconscious intention. Well, I wasn't aware that I wanted that at the time, but my actions clearly showed that that was where my will was going. So we have different levels, different kinds of intention. Again, you can finesse those, you can incorporate these into the same basic scheme. The other sting in the tail is that at one level this seems to be making it personal responsibility. It's now up to me. But that in Theravadan, so the school of the elders, Buddhism, which is what we're really talking about here, absolutely insist on the illusory nature of the self. What do we have instead of the individual, the person? Well, we have the 5 skandhas, the 5 heaps, the 5 aggregates. Form, perception, sensation, mental formations, consciousness. And it sees these very clearly as operating independently. In effect, we are just an effect. We experience the pain, we experience the discomfort, we experience the joy, we intend, but there's no unity there, there's no I, ultimately. So, it is Buddhaghosa, one of probably the greatest Theravadan teacher, I think most people would agree. I think about the 6th century, the Common Era. Who is the doer of karma? Who reaps the fruit of karma? Does karma mould a soul? In case we can understand that kind of idea, Yes, karma will frame your character, it will mould the whole of you. Buddha Ghosha's answer is no. No doer is there who does the deed, nor is there one who feels the fruit. Constituent parts alone roll on, the five skandhas: form, perception, sensation, mental formations, consciousness. This indeed is right discernment. So what this does is try and step back from all ideas of psychology, step back from all ideas really of right and wrong in that sense. It's not in that sense even really good or bad karma, it's just karma. And the more our intention frames actions out of ignorance and craving, the more karma we create, the more consequences. So what then is the aim of the spiritual life? Well, Buddhist ritual aimed at insight, practice aimed at achieving states of consciousness that give us insight, renunciation, above all, renunciation of the everyday world. All of these aim at the slowing of the generation of karma. If we think of karma as the great wheel of life, rolling endlessly on like a hugely heavy flywheel, we brake, we slow the turning of the wheel until eventually it stops. This is the arahant, the non-returner, the person who's brought the production of karma to an end through insight, through renunciation, through practice. And what's the outcome of this? Nibbana, nirvana, extinction, the end. Which of course only makes any sense within a culture which has the assumption of infinite rebirth. Because if you're going to be infinitely reborn, your suffering is literally infinite. Within the Theravadan idea of Buddhism, this is the aim. This is what spiritual practice is all about. Freedom from return, freedom from rebirth. Extinction means exactly that. No more birth. No return, no suffering. Which kind of leaves us, as lay people, with a problem. What do we do? What's our relationship to karma supposed to be? And I think, well, really two words: accountancy and punishment. In the sense that for the monk the aim is quite clear, this is quite explicit. What can a layperson's relationship with karma in this sense be? Well, your job becomes to secure a better rebirth in a spiritual sense. Though people being people, a better rebirth for most people means more money, better looking, the rest of it we know. To secure a better rebirth, or perhaps in a future life, to become a monastic. Yes, we can hope to practice before that. What will bring this about? Well, the quality of our intention, the quality of our deeds, the quality of the karma which we are generating in our messy, horrible, compromised everyday lives. And so it becomes a kind of, well, really, accountancy project, which is going to be better, the positive deeds which I carry out, the positive intentions or the negative. And within the Mahayana movement, this becomes merit. I generate merit by good actions, good intentions. Being human, we also want to see if there are shortcuts. Maybe a bit like accountancy. Maybe I can cook the books. Maybe I can transfer this from this column to that column and progress spiritually faster, or just get more money, or whatever. And if you look at the Buddhist literature and how this is lived out in actual popular Buddhism in the Asian countries where it found a home, you'll find every possible version of this, even down to the buying and selling of merit. I have led an enormously spiritual life. I have built up an unbelievable store of merit. $100,000, and it's yours. So that's the kind of, and I'm sounding a bit facetious. That's unfair, because this is real people leading their real lives, trying to make the sense of this stuff. The other direction we can go in, and this is where we actually, in some sense, the most important aspect, where it engages with what we think of as the popular Christian tradition, how we like to think about things, which is judgment. Am I a good or am I a bad person? Taken all in all, will I go to heaven or will I go to hell? How am I going to be judged? Now, this isn't part of the original Buddhist project, and yet we find figures like Yama, Lord of Death, within the Tibetan tradition, within the Chinese tradition, within the Japanese tradition. And they very much play into popular traditions of judgment and damnation. And of course, within the Buddhist tradition, we evolve hells. We evolve many, many, many hells where we will end up, if our deeds are sufficiently badly intentioned, because this is Buddhism, for eons, for time unimaginably measurable, before we move on. The cycle of life, the turning of the great wheel. So, weirdly, and a little bit like predestinarian Protestantism, my wealth shows that in former lives I have been good. I have been very good. As does my power, as does my beauty. All of these can be seen as being justified. Equally, if I'm poor, if I'm ill, obviously I've done something wrong. Many, many, many things wrong. And in a Buddhist vision of the world where there is no beginning, there is no end, there's room for an awful lot of wrong. Again, though, if we bring this back to this original insight, there is no room for judgment, because that's presupposing an ongoing, wholly responsible person. There's certainly no room for praise or for blame in that sense. In other parts of the Buddhist tradition, very determinedly cautious, pride. Don't assume that it was anything to do with you because things went well. But equally, don't blame others. They're living out the course of their life. We tie ourselves in knots. And we cannot say, there are endless Buddhist scripture finessing this, just as there is endless Christian theology trying to work things through. And then we have a further elaboration of karma, where we begin to see it almost a bit like a Newtonian universe. It is simply the playing out, a vast cosmic balancing of good and bad, action and reaction. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. That was my reason for bringing in Newton there. That finally there is balance, wholeness. Now again, from what we know of the early scriptures, if they are indeed the early scriptures, the Buddha was very insistent that karma actually only applies to what we can think of as ethical questions, as moral questions. If you're sick, doubtless he had his explanation, but it would be entirely consistent with actually, that was streptococcal bacillus, or that was actually coronavirus, or whatever. That this doesn't simply erase the laws of nature, how nature operates. But we can have this extension to it of everything, whereby it ripples out. And I'm deliberately, obviously, not coming to any conclusion here, not trying to give you a proper version of it. This is really how karma works, because however we imagine it, we keep coming back to the same fundamental questions, which is why I began with Lawrence of Arabia. All of us, surely, are familiar with the sensation of, I'm clearly being punished for something. It's not fair. What did I do to deserve this? I threw an apple core out the window while I was driving, and look, there's one on my front drive. Little glimpses of images of karma, of judgment, of responsibility, of punishment, of our lack of control, of our just being flung by the world, or of our determination that I can master this, I can control this. Barry, my teacher, and I think I'm quoting him right here. I don't always get him right. Shit happens. There wasn't any reason for it. I didn't do anything. On the other hand, the philosopher J. Garfield says, shit happens. This is the very opposite of the idea of karma. It's the very opposite of Buddhism. Everything is cause and effect. See, I think both of these things are true because, from my point of view, shit happens. From the great sum of the interactions of everything, well, yeah, obviously, everything is also causality. It depends on our perspective. But whether I see it as the outside world having it in for me, whether I see it as the fruit of my own actions, whether I see it as my determination to frame the world according to my will, we're separate. There's a me, a real me, and then there's a world out there that's crowding me in, or that I'm bending to my will. The one thing I will say about karma, however we want to figure it, however we want to understand it, not separate. I'm part of the world. I'm an embodied being, acting only ever as part of this world, not separate. I think it's really useful to try and become aware of when we're evoking one of these notions of causality, of karma, of morality, whatever. When we're excusing or collapsing or raging, it's always useful to become aware, to recognize this. We always feel separate. Separate happens to us all the time. And yet, that's the illusion, not the feeling of it, which is perfectly real, but the illusion that that's true, that that's how things are. Just another aspect of our resistance to our life as it is, but like every aspect of our resistance to our life as it is, worth investigating, worth becoming aware of, worth relating to the whole, because I'm part of the whole. I'm not separate. Gloria, let's sit for 10 minutes.